When Alex Mercer woke up in a hive city, he was the most dangerous biological weapon humanity had ever seen, until he started consuming Chaos Marines and realized the virus inside him was evolving into something that terrified even the Chaos gods. But was Mercer the greatest weapon of humanity? Or had they just unleashed something far worse than any Xenos threat? The darkness smelled wrong. Alex Mercer's eyes snapped open to air, thick with chemicals, rust, and something else. Something rotting. His last memory was Manhattan, the nuclear blast, and then nothing. Now he lay in a puddle of filth in an alley so narrow his shoulders nearly touched both walls. Metal walls covered in symbols he didn't recognize rose hundreds of feet above him. The sky was a thin strip of polluted orange between towering structures. His body felt different. The blacklight virus hummed through his veins, checking systems, confirming he was whole. But something was off. The air pressure was wrong. Gravity felt slightly heavier. The sounds echoing through the darkness were industrial, mechanical, but nothing like the machines he knew. Mercer stood, his enhanced senses expanding outward, voices nearby. Human voices speaking a language he couldn't understand. Not yet. The words were harsh, guttural, mixed with static-filled mechanical sounds. Two figures emerged from the smog at the alley's end. They wore crude armor pieced together from scrap metal and carried weapons that looked like oversized pistols with too many barrels. The first one spoke, pointing at Mercer. The words meant nothing, but the tone was clear. Threat, aggression. The kind of predatory assessment Mercer had seen 1,000 times in New York's worst neighborhoods. The second one laughed, a wet, gurgling sound through his respirator mask. He raised his weapon. Mercer raised his hand slowly, a universal gesture. The gun roared anyway, but Mercer was already moving. The virus had analyzed the weapon's barrel angle, calculated, trajectory, shifted his body 3 inches left. The bullet passed through empty air. Before the ganger could fire again, Mercer's hand had transformed. Black and red tendrils erupted from his palm, wrapping around the man's throat, pulling him close. The consumption was automatic, instinctive. The tendrils pierced skin, invaded bloodstream, broke down molecular bonds. The ganger's body dissolved into biomass that flowed into Mercer's own. Memories flooded his mind in a chaotic rush. A life of violence in the Underhive, scraping for food, trading slaves, killing for scraps of territory, and knowledge. The language suddenly made sense. The symbols on the walls resolved into meaning. This wasn't Earth. This was Secundus Prime, a hive world in something called the Imperium of Man. The consumed ganger's memories painted a picture of a civilization spanning the galaxy, ruled by a corpse god called the Emperor, a society built on fear, faith, and endless war. The Underhive, where Mercer now stood, was home to billions, who lived and died in darkness, mining ore for weapons they'd never see, serving masters they'd never meet. The second ganger screamed and ran. Mercer let him go. He needed time to process what he'd just learned. The memories were fragmentary, incomplete, seen through the lens of a brutal life that knew nothing beyond survival. But they painted a picture of a universe far darker than anything Mercer had encountered. He walked deeper into the industrial maze. The passages were lit by failing lumen strips that cast everything in sickly yellow light. Everywhere he looked, he saw suffering. Workers with mechanical implants replacing limbs moved like zombies through their tasks. Children with burn scars begged for food scraps. Bodies lay in corners, ignored by passers-by who had seen too much death to care. The virus inside him screamed, "Consume them. Learn more. Grow stronger." Each person was a source of information, of biomass, of power. But Mercer held back. He needed to understand this place before he acted. Blind consumption would draw attention he couldn't afford. Over the next 3 days, he moved through the Underhive like a predator. He consumed carefully, selecting targets who wouldn't be missed or mourned. Gang enforcers who preyed on the weak. Corrupt overseers who hoarded food while workers starved. A flesh trader who sold children to the upper levels. Each consumption added knowledge. Each feeding taught him more about this grim reality. The Imperium was vast beyond comprehension. Millions of worlds, trillions of humans, all bound together by worship of an emperor who had been dying for 10,000 years. The technology was simultaneously advanced and primitive. They had ships that traveled between stars, but relied on prayers and rituals to make them work. And the threats, the consumed memories spoke of horrors that made Mercer's own existence seem tame. Aliens that consumed entire planets, corrupted humans who worshipped dark, gods, machines older than human civilization that wanted to kill all life. The virus inside him was changing too, adapting. The biomass it processed here was different from anything on Earth. The people of this world had been modified over millennia. Genetic engineering, cybernetic implants, exposure to things the memories called radiation, and warp energies. The blacklight virus integrated it all, evolving with each new sample. Then, the deaths started. Mercer heard about them in whispers among the workers. Bodies found drained in the lower manufacturing districts. Husks of skin and bone with everything inside gone. The enforcers, local security forces in black armor, investigated but found nothing. No witnesses, no evidence. Just empty corpses appearing every night. Mercer knew what was happening. Something else was hunting in the underhive. Something that consumed like he did. On the 5th night, he found it. Or rather, it found him. The creature wore human skin like a poorly fitted Dissay suit. Its movements were too fluid, too precise. When it smiled, there were too many teeth. It emerged from a doorway Mercer had just passed, moving with unnatural silence. When it spoke, its voice buzzed like insects crawling over metal. The words came in broken Gothic, the common language Mercer had learned through consumption. New scent, new hunter. You are not of the brood. What are you? Mercer's hands shifted into claws. I could ask you the same question. The creature's skin split down the middle. What emerged was a nightmare of chitin and blades. 4 arms ending in razor-sharp talons. An elongated skull with too many eyes. A genestealer, the consumed memories supplied with a spike of primal terror. Advanced scouts for the Tyrannid hive fleets. Alien horrors that consumed entire worlds, breaking down all biomass to fuel their endless hunger. They collided in the narrow passage. The gene-stealer's claws raked across Mercer's chest, tearing through his jacket, drawing blood. But the wounds closed almost instantly, flesh knitting back together at impossible speed. Mercer's fist, transformed into a massive hammer of hardened biomass, caught the creature in its elongated skull. Chitin cracked with a sound like breaking glass. The gene-stealer hissed and lunged again, faster this time. Its claws were everywhere, striking from angles that should have been impossible. Mercer dodged most strikes, but the few that connected burned with unnatural cold. The creature's biology was alien in ways that went beyond mere physical difference. Mercer changed tactics. His body erupted with tendrils, dozens of them, creating a cage of black and red biomass. The gene-stealer was fast, but Mercer was faster. He'd fought monsters before. Hunters. Supreme hunters. Abominations created by Blackwatch. This thing was dangerous, but it wasn't beyond him. The tendrils wrapped around the alien's limbs, pulling it close despite its thrashing. The consumption began. The gene-stealer's biology fought back immediately. Its cells tried to infect his own, to rewrite his genetic code and turn him into a hybrid host. Mercer felt the alien DNA attempting to integrate, to transform him into something that served the distant hive mind. But the blacklight virus was already the perfect predator. It consumed the alien cells, broke them down, absorbed their strengths, and discarded their weaknesses. The battle happened at a molecular level, invisible, but no less violent than the physical struggle. New memories flooded in, not individual thoughts like with humans, but impressions. Hunger, the endless, all-consuming hunger of the hive mind. The drive to spread, to infect, to prepare worlds for consumption. And something else, a vast presence lurking in the dark between stars, watching, waiting, calculating. The hive mind touched his consciousness for a brief moment. It recognized him as threat, as contamination. as something that needed to be eliminated. Mercer staggered back as the Genstealer's body dissolved completely into his biomass. His hands were shaking. The integration was happening too fast. The virus processing alien biology at speeds that pushed even his enhanced system to its limits. His body was changing in ways he didn't direct. His cells restructured themselves, incorporating Tyranid adaptations. For a moment, his skin rippled with chitinous patterns before returning to normal flesh. Alarms blared through the underhive. Lights flickered to full brightness for the first time in years. Armored boots echoed through the passages from multiple directions. The enforcers had finally responded to the string of deaths with overwhelming force. But they weren't alone. A new group descended into the lower levels. These warriors wore armor that gleamed even in the dirty light. Real armor, not the scrap metal of local enforcers. Powered armor with the symbols of the Astra Militarum and the Adeptus Arbites. And with them, someone else. Inquisitor Karamazov arrived mounted on his throne of judgment, a walking dreadnought platform bristling with weapons. The machine's heavy footfalls shook the metal floor. Karamazov himself was a large man, his face scarred from acid burns, one eye replaced with a glowing red augmetic. When he spoke, his voice was amplified through the throne's voxcasters, carrying absolute authority. "Seal the district. No one enters or leaves. We have a potential Xenos infection scenario. Deploy gene scanners at all checkpoints. Anyone showing signs of Genestealer taint is to be executed immediately and their body burned." His retinue moved with practiced efficiency. 30 armed soldiers created a perimeter. Tech priests deployed scanning equipment that hummed with strange energies. And Karamazov's throne marched toward the spot where Mercer had consumed the Genestealer, following sensor readings that tracked biological anomalies. Mercer watched from the shadows, his body pressed against a ventilation shaft 3, levels up. The consumed memories told him everything he needed to know about Inquisitors. They were the Imperium's secret police, empowered to kill anyone they suspected of corruption or heresy. They commanded armies, they destroyed planets, and they had access to weapons and knowledge far beyond normal humans. Karamazov's throne stopped where the Genestealer had died. Mechanical arms extended from the platform, collecting samples of residue. Tech priests swarmed around, their augmetic eyes analyzing every trace of biological material. "Genestealer confirmed," Karamazov announced. "But the biomass consumption pattern is anomalous. Too complete, too efficient. Standard Genestealer feeding leaves more remains." He turned slowly, the throne rotating on its axis. "There's another Xenos presence here. Something that killed and consumed the Genestealer." One of his acolytes, a woman with a shaved head covered in circuit-pattern tattoos, consulted a handheld device. Red runes scrolled across. Its screen. "My lord, the bio readings are unlike anything in the database. Whatever did this isn't in our records. The cellular breakdown suggests advanced adaptive consumption. Possibly a new Tyranid strain." "Then we're dealing with an unprecedented biological threat." Karamazov's scarred face showed no emotion. "Alert the planetary governor. Initiate quarantine protocols for sectors 7 through 12. Deploy gene scanner checkpoints at all transit points. And send word to my ship. I want containment teams and flamers deployed within the hour." If this is a new Tyranid adaptation, we burn it out before it can spread. Mercer felt ice form in his stomach. They were hunting him now. And unlike the gangers and corrupt officials he'd consumed, these people had the resources and training to actually pose a threat. He needed to move, to escape the underhive and find answers. The consumed memories had shown him that this hive city extended upward for miles, upper levels where the wealthy lived in comparative luxury. Perhaps there he could find a way off this world, a way to understand how he'd crossed between realities. But as he prepared to climb higher into the ventilation system, something stopped him, a sound from below, screaming, children screaming. Mercer looked down through a grating. In a side passage, he saw a group of young workers, none older than 12, huddled against a wall. They wore the simple gray coveralls of factory laborers, their skin marked with identification burns. The enforcers had them surrounded, weapons raised. An officer was checking the children's identification marks against a data slate. "These sectors are under quarantine. Lord Inquisitor's orders. No movement between districts until the Xenos threat is eliminated. One child, a girl with burn scars covering half her face, stepped forward. Her voice was small but defiant. "But our food rations come from the upper processors. If you seal us in without supplies, we'll starve." "Please, we haven't done anything wrong." The officer's expression didn't change. "Not my concern. Quarantine procedures supersede ration schedules. Return to your HAB units immediately, or be shot for violating inquisitorial mandate." "But we'll die," another child pleaded. The officer raised his weapon. "Better a few hundred die of hunger than millions die of Xenos infection. Now move, or I will interpret your resistance as potential corruption." The virus inside Mercer pulsed. Not hunger this time, but something else. Something almost like rage. These people, this system, it ground human lives into dust and called it order, called it necessary. The Imperium's brutal calculus valued potential security over actual lives. It was everything Mercer had fought against in his own world, magnified 1,000-fold. For the first time since arriving in this reality, Alex Mercer made a choice that wasn't about survival or learning. He dropped through the grating, landing between the enforcers and the children with a crash that bent the metal floor. The officer spun, weapon raised. "Identify yourself! This is a restricted zone under inquisitorial seal!" Mercer's hands shifted into blades, black biomass forming edges sharp enough to cut through the enforcer's armor. "Someone who's tired of watching you people crush the weak." The fight was brief and brutal. The enforcer's weapons fired solid slugs that tore through his body, punching holes that leaked blood and biomass. But the wounds healed faster than they could shoot, flesh flowing back together like liquid. Mercer's blades cut through their armor like paper, finding gaps, severing arteries, disabling without necessarily killing when he could help it. In 30 seconds, it was over. The enforcers lay on the ground, some dead, others merely incapacitated. Mercer stood over them, breathing hard, his hands still covered in blood that was being absorbed back into his skin. The children stared at him with wide eyes. The girl was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you?" Mercer looked at his hands, at the blood being absorbed, at the biomass still shifting beneath his skin as it processed the tyrannid adaptations he'd consumed. "I don't know anymore." Above them, the alarms intensified. Karamazov's sensors had detected the combat. The Inquisitor was coming, and he would bring overwhelming force. Mercer looked at the children. "Run. Get somewhere safe. Stay away from the checkpoints. There is nowhere safe." The burned girl said with a fatalism that no child should possess. "Not in the Underhive, not anywhere." She was probably right, but Mercer couldn't save everyone. He could barely save himself. He turned and ran deeper into the industrial maze, leaving the children behind. Behind him, he heard the heavy footfalls of Karamazov's throne of judgment approaching. The hunt had truly begun, and Mercer was learning that in this dark universe there were no good choices. Only degrees, of terrible ones. The children scattered into the darkness as Mercer ran. Behind him, he heard the mechanical thunder of Karamazov's throne of judgment and shouted orders amplified through voxcasters. Searchlights cut through the smog-filled passages. Attack dogs with cybernetic enhancements bayed as they picked up his scent, their augmented olfactory sensors locked onto the unique biological signature of black light. Mercer couldn't simply hide. His biomass was too distinct, too alien to this universe's biology. The gene scanners would identify him instantly. So, he did the only thing he could. He consumed another worker, a man dying of lung rot in a side passage, and took his form completely. Skin, bone structure, even the cybernetic implants. When the search teams passed him 2 levels up, they saw only another Underhive laborer trying to avoid the quarantine chaos. But maintaining a false form was exhausting. The blacklight virus fought against the constraint, wanting to optimize, to evolve, to become more efficient. Mercer forced it down, kept it contained. For 3 days, he moved through the lower hive like a ghost, never staying in one form for more than a few hours, always consuming the dying or the already dead to maintain his disguises. The quarantine expanded. Karamazov sealed off 12 sectors, trapping millions inside. Food shipments stopped. Water reclamation systems were shut down to prevent potential contamination spread. People began dying of thirst and starvation within 48 hours. The Inquisitors' response was methodical and merciless. Better millions die of deprivation than billions die of Xenos infection. Mercer watched it happen through dozens of eyes, each consumption giving him new perspective on the horror unfolding. He'd thought he understood brutality. New York had shown him what humans were capable of when pushed to extremes. But this was different. This was systematic. Industrial-scale human suffering treated as acceptable collateral damage. Then the sky changed. Mercer felt it before he saw it. A tremor in reality itself, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. The workers in the upper foundries saw it first through the hive's viewing ports. Ships were translating into the system. Not the clean, angular vessels of the Imperial Navy, but something organic. Twisted. Wrong. The consumed memories identified them instantly. Chaos vessels. Ships that had spent millennia in the warp. That impossible dimension where physics broke down and nightmares became real. These particular ships belonged to the Death Guard, warriors who worshipped Nurgle, the god of disease and decay. Lord Typhus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Terminus Est. His armor was green with corrosion, home to colonies of flies and worse things. Rust ate through ceramite that should have been eternal. Where he walked, deck plating corroded and flesh rotted. His presence was a blight upon reality itself. His sorcerers had detected something unusual, while scrying through the warp. A new biological anomaly on Secundus Prime. Something that consumed and adapted in ways that resembled the grandfather's gifts. Typhus had grown curious. New plagues were always welcome additions to Nurgle's garden. Prepare landing craft, Typhus commanded, his voice a wet gurgle through his ancient helmet's vox grill. This infection bears investigation. We shall introduce ourselves to this new growth and see if it is worthy of the grandfather's attention. 14 plague marine squads descended through the atmosphere in drop pods that screamed down like falling stars. They struck the upper hive first, breaching through armored domes designed to withstand orbital bombardment. The impact alone killed thousands. What followed was worse. The plague marines moved through hab blocks with methodical efficiency. Their bolters fired explosive rounds that detonated inside human bodies, painting walls with viscera. Their plague knives wept toxins that dissolved flesh on contact. And wherever they walked, the very air turned septic. Diseases that had been extinct for millennia bloomed in their wake. They weren't mindless killers. They moved with purpose, following Auspex readings that tracked the biological anomaly deeper into the hive. And they killed everything in their path, spreading Nurgle's gifts with every touch, every breath, every drop of diseased blood. Mercer felt the assault through his network of recent consumptions. The memories of the dead lingered in his biomass for hours after integration. He experienced dozens of deaths as the plague marines carved through the hive levels. Felt the unnatural diseases eating through enhanced immune systems that should have been able to fight off anything. For the first time since arriving in this reality, Mercer felt something close to fear. The consumed memories had warned him about Chaos Space Marines, but experiencing their power secondhand was different. They were faster than baseline humans, stronger, and they radiated something that made reality itself feel sick. The diseases they carried weren't just biological. They were wrong on a fundamental level. The Plague Marines fought their way down through 6 hive levels in as many hours. Imperial Guard regiments attempted to establish defensive positions. Heavy weapons, teams with las cannons that could punch through tank armor, demolition charges that brought down entire sections of the hive. None of it stopped the Death Guard's advance. Arbite's judges organized evacuation protocols, trying to get civilians clear. But there was nowhere to evacuate to. The quarantine Karamazov had established trapped everyone inside the sealed sectors. Millions of people caught between the Inquisitors' containment and the Chaos invasion. Mercer made a decision. He couldn't hide anymore. These invaders would kill everyone in the hive looking for him, and the Imperium's response would be just as lethal. He had to act. He abandoned his disguise, letting his body return to its natural state. The transformation was painful. Bones restructured, muscles reformed. The Tyranid adaptations he'd consumed asserted themselves, giving him strength and speed beyond what blacklight alone provided. When the change completed, Mercer stood 8 feet tall, his form rippling with barely contained power. He found the Plague Marines in an abandoned factorum 3 levels below the main assault. 7 of them, their armor decorated with symbols of decay and 3 circled flies. Their leader, a champion named Felthius the Tainted, raised his bolter as Mercer emerged from the shadows. "There," Felthius said, his voice distorted by layers of corruption, and his helmet's damaged Vox system. "The source of the anomaly. Grandfather Nurgle will be pleased with this discovery." Mercer didn't respond with words. He moved. The Blacklight virus had analyzed everything the consumed memories could tell him about Space Marine capabilities. Enhanced strength that could crush steel. Reinforced skeletal structure that could survive falls from orbit. Multi-layered organ systems, with redundancies for every vital function. Reaction times that operated in milliseconds. He'd need every advantage to survive this. His hand transformed into a blade as he closed the distance in a blur of motion. The nearest Plague Marine fired, but Mercer was already twisting. The bolt rounds exploded against his shoulder, tearing away chunks of biomass that regenerated instantly, flesh flowing back like disturbed water. His blade pierced the Marine's chestplate, cutting through ceramite armor that should have been impenetrable. But instead of the Marine falling, he laughed. A wet, bubbling sound that emerged from his helmet, like sewage backing up through pipes. "Pain? We abandoned pain millennia ago. We are Nurgle's chosen. We embrace entropy. We cannot die, because we have already accepted death." The Marine's gauntleted fist, swollen with disease and corruption, caught Mercer across the face. The impact sent him crashing through a support pillar, metal buckling around his body. Before he could recover, 3 more Plague Marines were on him. Their plague knives, ancient blades that wept constant streams of toxic fluid, cut into his biomass. The wounds weren't healing normally. The tissue around each cut turned black and began to rot. Not normal cellular death, but something worse. Something unnatural. The viruses and bacteria coating the blades were infecting him, and the Blacklight virus couldn't fight them off through normal means because they weren't really biological. They were touched by the warp, by chaos itself. They operated on rules that defied conventional biology. Mercer roared and exploded outward, tendrils erupting from his body like a bomb of flesh and bone. The Plague Marines were thrown back by the sheer force. One lost an arm, the limb torn away at the shoulder joint. Another had his helmet torn free, revealing a face so diseased it barely resembled anything human. Boils covered every surface. One eye had rotted away, leaving a weeping socket. Maggots crawled through exposed flesh. But they kept coming. They didn't fear death or pain. They welcomed it as part of the natural cycle. Birth, growth, decay, death, rebirth. Nurgle's eternal wheel. Mercer changed tactics. If he couldn't kill them conventionally, he'd try consumption. His tendrils shot forward, wrapping around the wounded Plague Marine, the one without a helmet. The integration began. The Plague Marine's biomass was unlike anything Mercer had consumed before. It fought back with impossible ferocity. Diseases that had no names flooded into his system. Cancers that grew faster than his healing factor could remove them. Parasites that existed half in reality and half in some other dimension, feeding on both physical tissue and something else. Something the consumed memories called soul essence. The Blacklight virus went into overdrive, analyzing, adapting, fighting. It isolated the diseases, compartmentalized them, began breaking down their structure. But for every pathogen it defeated, 2 more emerged. The corruption wasn't just biological. It was metaphysical. It infected on levels Mercer didn't have defenses for. He felt his consciousness being pulled towards something vast and terrible. A presence that dwelled in the spaces between reality. Nurgle, the plague god himself, watching with amusement as his champion was consumed. For a moment, Mercer's mind touched something incomprehensible. A garden that shouldn't exist, where diseases grew like flowers and plagues dripped from trees, where decay and rebirth happened simultaneously in impossible cycles, where suffering and joy were the same thing. all part of the grandfather's loving embrace. It was beautiful and horrible in equal measure. Mercer broke contact, staggering backward. The Plague Marine was half gone, his armor empty, where the tendrils had dissolved him. But Mercer had paid a price. His body was changing in ways he couldn't control. Boils appeared on his skin, bursting and regenerating in cycles. His blood ran thick with infections that his enhanced immune system fought constantly. The remaining Plague Marines didn't retreat. They advanced, recognizing true threat now. He consumes our essence, Felthius said, and there was something like excitement in his corrupted voice. He adapts to our gifts. Truly, this one is worthy of Grandfather's personal attention. We shall bring him low and deliver him as an offering. The battle intensified. Mercer fought with everything he had, his body a constantly shifting weapon. Blades, hammers, claws, whips of hardened biomass. He consumed 2 more Plague Marines, each integration bringing new power and new corruption. His body became a battlefield, where blacklight and chaos warred for dominance. When the last Plague Marine fell, Mercer stood alone in the Factorum, surrounded by empty armor and pools of diseased blood. His body was a horror. The corruption spread through him in visible waves. Black veins spiderwebbed across his skin. Boils erupted and healed only to erupt again. His eyes flickered between their normal color and a sickly green glow, and he could feel something watching him now. Not through consumed memories or secondhand knowledge, but directly. Nurgle's attention had been drawn to him. The Plague God found him interesting, a new form of life that consumed and adapted. A potential vector for unprecedented plagues. Mercer tried to purge the corruption, to force the diseased biomass out of his system through sheer will, but it wouldn't leave. It had integrated too deeply. The Blacklight virus had consumed the chaos-tainted flesh and learned from it. Now, the two were inseparable, woven together at a fundamental level. He looked at his hands. They flickered between healthy flesh and rotting tissue, oscillating between states faster than the eye could track. His reflection, in a pool of contaminated water, showed a face that was sometimes his own, sometimes something else, something that belonged to Nurgle's garden. He was becoming a hybrid, something that had never existed before, a fusion of scientific virus and supernatural corruption, and he didn't know how to stop it. Above, in the upper hive, Inquisitor Karamazov received combat reports. His tech priests had detected massive warp energy signatures in the lower factorums. Biological and immaterial readings mixed together in impossible combinations. His tactical officers reported that the Death Guard assault had stalled. The Plague Marines had stopped their advance and were now withdrawing, carrying their wounded back to their dropships. They found something, Karamazov said, studying the hololithic displays. Something that either satisfied their mission parameters or exceeded their ability to capture. Either way, it confirms the threat is unprecedented. His second-in-command, an Arbite's Judge Marshal, stepped forward. "My lord, shall we deploy the Flamers? Purge the entire sector with Promethium?" "No," came a new voice. A woman in ornate armor decorated in red and gold stepped into the command center. She wore the symbol of the Inquisition, but her specific insignia marked her as Ordo Xenos. That would destroy valuable research material. Karamazov's augmetic eye whirred as it focused on the newcomer. "Inquisitor Valeria. I was not informed of your presence on Secundus Prime." "Because I just arrived," Valeria replied calmly. "I've been tracking xenobiological anomalies across this sector for 3 years. When I heard reports of an unknown organism that consumed a gene stealer and then fought Plague Marines to a standstill, I knew I had to investigate personally." "This is an Ordo Hereticus matter," Karamazov said coldly. "Chaos corruption takes precedence over Xenos study." "Except this isn't purely chaos corruption," Valeria countered. "Your own readings show the anomaly maintains coherent consciousness despite Nurgle's taint. It fights the corruption even as it integrates it. That makes it xenobiological first, chaos touch second, which places it in my jurisdiction." The two Inquisitors stared at each other. Neither had clear authority to supersede the other. They were peers, and neither would back down easily. Finally, Karamazov spoke. "What do you propose?" "Let me make contact," Valeria said. "Before you burn everything to ash, give me 72 hours to understand what we're dealing with. If I can't contain or control it in that time, you can purge the sector with my blessing." Karamazov considered. 48 hours, and you operate under my oversight. Any sign the corruption is spreading beyond the current containment zone, and I will not hesitate. Valeria nodded. Agreed. In the lower factorum, Mercer heard none of this. He was focused entirely on the internal battle raging through his cells. The Blacklight virus and Nurgle's corruption fought for dominance, and Mercer himself was caught between them, his identity fragmenting under the strain. For the first time since becoming what he was, Alex Mercer wondered if he would survive what he was becoming, and whether survival would mean remaining himself or becoming something else entirely. Mercer felt the corruption spreading through his body in waves. Each pulse brought new mutations. Bone spurs erupted from his shoulders, then were reabsorbed. His skin rippled with patterns of decay and regeneration happening simultaneously. The Blacklight virus fought to maintain stability, but the chaos taint operated on rules that defied biological logic. He needed help, or at least understanding. The consumed memories had shown him that chaos corruption was a death sentence in the Imperium. Anyone touched by it was executed without trial. But he also knew that some inquisitors, the radicals, studied forbidden things in hopes of turning them against humanity's enemies. The question was whether he could find one before Karamazov found him. The answer came sooner than expected. Mercer was moving through the industrial sectors, trying to stay ahead of the search teams, when a voice spoke through the facility's Vox system. "Alex Mercer, I know you can hear me. I am Inquisitor Valeria of the Ordo Xenos. I want to help you. More importantly, I believe you can help humanity." Mercer pressed against a wall, hidden in shadows. A trap? Probably. But he was running out of options. "I've studied the combat data from your encounter with the Plague Marines," Valeria continued, her voice calm and professional. "You consumed chaos-tainted biomass and survived. More than survived. You adapted. That should be impossible. I want to understand how, so you can weaponize it," Mercer said aloud, knowing she had surveillance throughout the sector. There was a pause. Then, "Yes. The Imperium needs every advantage against the enemies that seek to destroy us. But I'm also offering you something in return. My research facilities have the tools to analyze your condition. Perhaps even to help you control it." Mercer laughed bitterly. The sound echoed through the empty passage. "Control. That's what everyone wants. Control over me. Control over what I can do. Would you prefer Karamazov's solution?" Valeria asked. "He will burn this entire sector to ash within 48 hours. You, me, and 7 million civilians, all dead to ensure the corruption doesn't spread. At least my way. Some of us might survive." She had a point. Mercer had seen enough of the Imperium's methods to know she wasn't bluffing. Karamazov would absolutely kill millions to eliminate a potential threat. "Where?" Mercer asked. "Coordinates are being transmitted to the nearest Vox receiver. Come, alone. Come, now. And Alex, if you truly care about protecting innocent lives as your actions with those children suggested, you'll want to hear what I've discovered about the Tyranids." That got his attention. Mercer made his way to the coordinates, moving through maintenance tunnels that avoided the main search patterns. The facility Valeria had commandeered was a converted manufactorum in the mid-hive. Heavily guarded, but the guards were clearly expecting him. They didn't open fire as he approached. Inside, Valeria waited in a laboratory filled with equipment that mixed advanced technology with ritual components. Tech priests moved between stations, their mechanical appendages manipulating samples and data screens. The Inquisitor herself was younger than Mercer expected, perhaps in her 40s, with sharp eyes that assessed him clinically. "Fascinating," she said, studying him openly. "The corruption is visible but contained. Your cellular structure is in constant flux, fighting to maintain equilibrium. And yet, you retain coherent thought and identity. How long has it been since you consumed the Plague Marines?" 18 hours, Mercer replied. staying near the exit. And you haven't succumbed to mindless rage or daemon possession. Remarkable. Valeria gestured to a medical platform. Will you allow my tech priests to take samples? Non-invasive scans? Why should I trust you? Because you don't have a choice, Valeria said bluntly. And because I'm the only person on this planet who sees you as anything other than a threat to be eliminated. I see potential. Mercer considered. The corruption inside him pulsed, whispering that he should consume her, take her knowledge, escape on his own terms. But another part, the part that was still Alex Mercer, and not just the virus, recognized that he needed help. He stepped onto the platform. The tech priests worked quickly, their scanners humming as they analyzed his biology. Valeria watched the data streams intently, occasionally asking questions that Mercer answered as honestly as he could. Where he came from, how blacklight worked, what he'd consumed since arriving in this reality. The gene stealer consumption is particularly interesting, Valeria said, manipulating a hololithic display that showed his cellular structure. You integrated Tyranid adaptive mechanisms. And unlike normal Tyranid consumption, where the hive mind assimilates the victim, you remained independent. The Tyranid cells became part of you, not the other way around. Is there a point to this? Mercer asked, feeling exposed under the scanners. Yes. A Tyranid splinter fleet entered the system 6 hours ago. They detected the Chaos incursion and likely the gene stealer's death. They're coming to investigate and probably to consume whatever biomass they can harvest. Mercer felt his stomach tighten. How long? First wave lands in approximately 9 hours. Full invasion within 24. Valeria turned to face him directly. Here's what I propose. You encounter the Tyranids. Let them attempt to consume you. I want to see what happens when they try to integrate biomass, carrying both blacklight and chaos corruption. You want to use me as bait. I want to test a theory, Valeria corrected. Tyranids operate through perfect biological unity. Every organism connected to the hive mind, sharing information instantaneously. But what if something they consumed couldn't be integrated? What if it poisoned the connection itself? Mercer understood what she was suggesting. You think my corruption could damage the hive mind? I think you're a biological weapon unlike anything the Tyranids have encountered. They've fought chaos before, but never something that combines adaptive consumption with warp taint at a cellular level. The question is, what happens when an unstoppable force of biological perfection meets an adaptive virus carrying metaphysical corruption? And if it doesn't work? If they just consume me and move on? Valeria's expression hardened. Then I signal Karamazov and he executes Exterminatus protocol. The entire planet dies, but at least the corruption ends here. Before Mercer could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. One of the tech priests spoke in binary cant that Valeria's implants translated immediately. Her face paled. They're early. The Tyranids are making planetfall now. Multiple impact sites across the hive. Through the facility's viewing screens, Mercer watched as mycetic spores entered the atmosphere. Living drop pods that screamed down like meteors, burning through the clouds in trails of bioluminescent fire. They struck population centers with devastating force, each impact killing hundreds through sheer kinetic energy. Then, the pods split open, vomiting forth hordes of Tyranid organisms. Termagants with living weapons fused to their arms. Hormogounts built for speed and close combat. Larger creatures like warriors that coordinated the lesser organisms. And behind them, something massive. A carnifex, a living tank of muscle and chitin, smashing through defensive walls like they were made of paper. The Imperial Guard forces stationed in the mid-hive opened fire immediately. Las guns and heavy bolters filled the air with energy and explosive rounds. But for every Tyranid that fell, 3 more scrambled over its corpse. They moved with terrible coordination, each organism perfectly positioned to support the others. We're out of time, Valeria said. The nearest impact site is 7 sectors from here. They'll reach this facility within 2 hours. She turned to Mercer. Make your choice. Hide and hope Karamazov's evacuation ships have room for you, or test whether your infection can fight theirs. Mercer looked at his hands, at the corruption flickering beneath his skin, at the power he'd gained, and the humanity he was losing. He'd spent his entire existence as Blacklight trying to understand what he was. A virus that could think. A weapon that chose to protect. In this new reality, he'd been forced to confront uglier truths about power and survival. But maybe that corruption could be turned outward, used against enemies that would kill billions. If I do this, Mercer said, you guarantee the civilians in the sealed sectors get evacuated. No more starving them for your quarantine. Valeria hesitated. That's not within my authority. Make it within your authority, Mercer demanded. Or I walk and you can face the Mercer. Tyranids without me. After a long moment, Valeria nodded. Agreed. I'll coordinate with the Administratum. Food and water shipments resume immediately. She gestured to her tech priests. Implant the tracking beacon. We need to monitor whatever happens next. The procedure was quick. A small device, barely larger than a grain of rice, was injected beneath Mercer's skin. It merged with his biomass, becoming part of him. Through it, Valeria would be able to track his location and monitor his vital signs. One more thing, Valeria said, as Mercer prepared to leave. The Tyranids you're about to face aren't mindless. The hive mind is ancient and intelligent. It will recognize you as a threat or an opportunity. Either way, it will try to eliminate you or assimilate you. Don't underestimate it. Mercer walked toward the facility's main doors. They opened onto a street already filling with panicked civilians fleeing the advancing Tyranid swarm. I won't. He moved through the chaos toward the nearest impact site. People screamed and ran around him. Parents carrying children. The elderly being trampled in the rush. The Imperium's defensive forces tried to maintain order, but panic was spreading faster than any organism. Then Mercer saw them. The first wave of Tyranids, approaching through the smoke and fire. Hormagaunts, their blade-like limbs gleaming as they scuttled forward on all fours. They moved with insect-like coordination, each one perfectly positioned to intercept fleeing humans. Mercer didn't run. He walked forward, directly into their path. The Hormagaunts noticed him immediately. Through the hive mind's coordination, they identified him as anomalous. Not standard prey. Something different. They slowed, approaching with more caution than they showed the terrified civilians. A Tyranid warrior emerged from behind the lesser organisms. 12 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in bone swords. Its carapace was thick and scarred from previous battles. This was a synapse creature, one of the nodes through which the hive mind coordinated its swarms. The warrior studied Mercer with alien intelligence. Through its connection to the hive mind, countless other consciousnesses observed through its eyes. The hive fleet itself was watching, analyzing, calculating threat assessment. Then, it attacked. The warrior moved with shocking speed for something its size. Bone swords slashed in coordinated patterns, designed to overwhelm any defense. Mercer met the charge, his arms transforming into blades that caught the first strike. They grappled, 2 apex predators testing each other's strength. The warrior was powerful, its enhanced musculature capable of crushing steel. But Mercer was stronger. He drove it to the ground, his superior leverage forcing the creature onto its back. But instead of killing it, he did something else. He let his tendrils pierce its carapace, let his biomass flow into the Tyranid system, and then he consumed the Tyranid's biology. Was a masterwork of evolutionary perfection. Every cell optimized for maximum efficiency. No wasted energy. No unnecessary complexity. Pure function, directed by the hive mind's will. Each organ was a specialized tool, working in perfect harmony with the others, and connected to every cell was the hive mind itself, the vast psychic network that bound all Tyranids together. Millions of minds. Billions. All thinking as one, all focused on singular purpose. Consume, adapt, survive, grow stronger. As Mercer consumed the warrior, he felt himself being pulled into that network. For a moment, he was part of something incomprehensibly vast. He could feel every Tyranid organism in the invasion force, could sense their hunger, their unity, their perfect coordination. But then, his chaos corruption asserted itself. The black veins spreading through his biomass carried taint that the hive mind couldn't process. Where the hive mind represented pure biological order and efficiency, the chaos. Infection represented impossible mutation and metaphysical wrongness. The two concepts were fundamentally incompatible. The hive mind recoiled, not in fear exactly, but in rejection. Like an immune system identifying a pathogen that couldn't be broken down or integrated. The connection to the consumed warrior flickered and failed. The synapse bonds severed completely. The warrior's body began to change under Mercer's influence. Mutations sprouted across its carapace. Boils burst and reformed. Its bone swords twisted into irregular shapes that served no function. The perfect biological machine was becoming corrupted, its efficiency degraded by impossible changes. The other Tyranids sensed the disturbance immediately. The hive mind's coordination faltered in the immediate area. Hormagaunts stumbled and fought among themselves, their synaptic connection disrupted by the contaminated warrior's presence. Valeria watched through her surveillance equipment, her expression a mixture of horror and fascination. It's working. The corruption is spreading through their synaptic network, but not like normal infection. It's more like static interference in their communication. Magos Herrick, her chief tech priest, manipulated the data streams. The hive mind is attempting to isolate the contamination, severing connections to affected organisms, quarantining them from the collective consciousness. Can it succeed? Valeria asked. Unknown. The contamination carries both biological and warp-based components, the biological aspect that Tyranids could potentially adapt to. The warp corruption is the wild variable. On the street, more Tyranids arrived. They approached the corrupted warrior cautiously, their movements no longer perfectly coordinated. The hive mind was confused. It couldn't integrate the corruption, couldn't understand it, couldn't predict its behavior. Mercer released more infected biomass. His tendrils shot out, touching dozens of hormagaunts. Each one he touched began to change. Mutations spread across their bodies. Their connection to the hive mind weakened and failed. Within minutes, hundreds of organisms were compromised. They stumbled and fought among themselves, their perfect coordination destroyed by the corruption breaking their synaptic bonds. But Mercer felt something terrible happening. As he infected more Tyranids, as his consciousness spread through their biomass, the chaos corruption spread through him in response. Nurgle's influence grew stronger with each organism he touched. The Plague God was delighted by this development, his champion spreading corruption through the Great Devourer's children. The god's laughter echoed through the warp, audible to anyone with psychic sensitivity, and Mercer felt his control slipping. The more he spread the infection, the more he became the infection. The line between Alex Mercer and the virus was dissolving. He tried to pull back, to stop the spread, but it was too late. The infected Tyranids were carriers now. They would return to their bioships through the capillary towers, reconnect with the fleet's biomass pools, and spread the corruption to every organism the hive fleet had spawned. Mercer had just created something unprecedented, a chaos-tainted biological plague carried by Tyranid organisms, and he had no idea how to stop it. In orbit, the hive mind made its decision. This world was compromised beyond recovery. The biomass was too contaminated to safely consume. Better to abandon it and mark it as forbidden territory than risk corrupting the entire fleet. The bioships began preparations to retreat, but they left behind something new. A specialized organism, designed and birthed in the Norn Queen's chambers within minutes. A hunter-killer built specifically to eliminate the source of contamination. It dropped from the sky like a falling star, crashing into the street with enough force to crater the pavement. When it rose, Mercer saw what the hive mind had, created to kill him. It was unlike any Tyranid he'd seen in the consumed memories. 6 legs for stability, 4 arms, ending in bioblades that dripped acid. A tail split into 3 sections, each tipped with bone spurs. Its carapace was black as void, reinforced and layered, and its eyes glowed with terrible intelligence. The hive mind had poured enormous resources into creating this thing, and it had one purpose: end Alex Mercer before his corruption could spread further. The hunter-killer charged, and Mercer knew this battle would decide whether he survived or became just another victim of the grimdark universe he'd found himself in. The hunter-killer moved with precision that defied its size. Each step calculated, each strike designed for maximum efficiency. The hive mind had analyzed Mercer's combat patterns from the corrupted organism's final moments and built this creature specifically to counter his abilities. Its bioblade struck faster than Mercer could fully dodge. The first cut caught his shoulder, acid eating through biomass before his healing factor could compensate. The second strike caught his ribs, opening a wound that wouldn't close properly. The third would have taken his head if he hadn't transformed his arm into a shield at the last microsecond. Mercer fought back with everything he had: blades, hammers, whips of hardened biomass. But the hunter-killer adapted to each tactic within seconds. When he used speed, it predicted his movements. When he used strength, it redirected his force against him. The hive mind was learning through this creature in real time, adjusting its combat algorithms with each exchange. They crashed through buildings and vehicles, their battle tearing through the street in a wake of destruction. Civilians fled in terror. Imperial Guard soldiers tried to establish firing positions, but couldn't get clear shots without hitting both combatants. The hunter-killer's tail whipped around, all three sections striking simultaneously from different angles. Mercer caught two, but the third pierced his abdomen, driving deep into his core. The bone spur injected something directly into his biomass. Not venom, something else. Mercer felt it immediately. The substance was breaking down the chaos corruption at a cellular level. The hive mind had created a counter-agent specifically designed to neutralize Nurgle's taint. The black veins spreading through his body began to recede. The boils stopped erupting. His flickering vision stabilized. For a moment, Mercer felt relief. The corruption that had been eating him alive was being purged. Then he realized the terrible truth. The Tyranids had just given him exactly what he needed to save himself. But accepting their help meant consuming this creature, integrating the counter-agent fully into his biology. And that meant touching the hive mind again, letting it analyze him further, potentially giving it the information it needed to create something even more dangerous. The hunter-killer didn't give him time to consider. It pressed its advantage, driving Mercer backward with a flurry of strikes that left dozens of wounds across his body. Each wound injected more counter-agent. The chaos corruption receded further with each injection. Mercer made his choice. He stopped fighting defensively and charged directly at the creature, accepting its attacks. Blades pierced his chest. Acid burned his flesh. But he wrapped his tendrils around the hunter-killer and consumed with desperate intensity. The creature's biology flooded into him. The hive mind's countermeasures integrated into his cells. Methods to isolate chaos, corruption. Techniques to maintain ordered biology against impossible mutation. Ways to compartmentalize warp taint without letting it spread. The Tyranids had created these defenses specifically to fight what Mercer had become, and now he was using them to save himself. The chaos corruption that had been eating him alive suddenly found itself under assault from within. The countermeasures targeted the warp-touched cells, isolating them in biological prisons. Not destroying them completely, but containing them, locking them away where they couldn't spread or influence his consciousness. Mercer felt control returning. The whispers from Nurgle's garden faded to distant murmurs. His body stabilized, the constant mutations slowing to manageable levels. He was still infected, still carrying chaos taint, but it was contained now, controlled. The hunter-killer realized too late what had happened. In trying to purge Mercer's corruption to make him safe to consume, it had given to him the tools to survive. The creature tried to retreat, to break free and report this development to the hive mind. Mercer held it fast. The consumption completed. The Tyranid dissolved into biomass that he integrated fully. New memories flooded in. Not individual thoughts, but tactical data. Combat recordings from thousands of battles. Adaptation protocols. And something else. A final directive from the hive mind itself. The great consciousness had marked Secundus Prime as irreversibly contaminated. Too dangerous to consume. The bioships were already translating back into the warp, abandoning the system entirely. But before leaving, the hive mind had transmitted all combat data on Alex Mercer to the greater fleet. Information on his abilities, his corruption, his threat level. Across the galaxy, other hive fleets would know about him now, would adapt their tactics, would create new organisms designed to counter his specific abilities. He'd won this battle but made an enemy of an entire species. Valeria's voice crackled through a nearby voxcaster. Mercer, the Tyranids are retreating. Whatever you did, it worked. They're marking this system as forbidden and withdrawing. The invasion is over. Mercer stood among the wreckage, his body still processing the integration. The chaos corruption was contained but not eliminated. The Tyranid countermeasures were keeping it in check, but he could feel it testing those restraints constantly. This was a temporary solution, not a permanent cure. I'm coming back to the facility, Mercer said. Negative, Valeria replied, her tone urgent. Karamazov detected the warp signatures from your battle. He knows you're chaos-tainted now. He's deployed Grey Knights and is preparing to sterilize the entire sector. You have maybe 30 minutes before they arrive. Grey Knights. The consumed memories supplied information immediately. Space Marines specialized in fighting daemons. Warriors with psychic powers and weapons designed specifically to harm warp entities. If they came for him in his current state, the battle would be catastrophic. Where do I go? Mercer asked. Nowhere on this planet is safe, Valeria said. But I may have an alternative. There's a tech priest in my retinue who's been monitoring your bio-readings. He believes your unique biology might be of interest to certain Mechanicus factions, ones that study the intersection of biology and technology. Mercer felt suspicion immediately. You're selling me to the Mechanicus? I'm offering you a choice. Valeria corrected. Stay here and face Karamazov's purge, or come with me to Mars and meet people who might actually be able to help you understand what you've become. Mars. The heart of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the consumed memories painted it as a world of impossible technology and dangerous secrets, but also as a place where forbidden knowledge was studied in the name of the Omnissiah, the machine god the Mechanicus worshipped. Before Mercer could respond, reality shifted around him. The air crystallized into geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Metal surfaces began displaying equations that rewrote themselves faster than consciousness could follow. Through the distortion, figures emerged. They wore red robes covered in arcane symbols. Their flesh was more machine than human, augmented with dozens of cybernetic components. Tech priests, but not like the ones Mercer had seen with Valeria. These carried an aura of something older, something that operated on principles beyond standard Mechanicus doctrine. Their leader stood nearly 12 feet tall, his body a masterwork of augmentation. Belisarius Call, the consumed memories supplied. An archmagos known for radical innovations and dangerous experiments. Fascinating specimen. Call's voice was melodious despite coming from artificial vocal systems. A biological entity that has achieved what we of the Mechanicus seek through sacred technology. Integration of disparate place, systems, adaptive evolution, merger of the material and immaterial. Mercer's hands shifted into defensive configurations. Who are you and what do you want? I am Magos Dominus Call, and I want to understand you. Call's mechanical eyes focused with inhuman precision. You represent a unique intersection of biological adaptation and warp phenomena. Your existence suggests possibilities that could advance the Omnissiah's grand design significantly. The Omnissiah, Mercer said, remembering the consumed memories. The machine god. That's what the Mechanicus worships. Indeed. Though our understanding of the divine varies among different factions. Call moved closer, his augmented limbs extending scanning equipment. Some of us believe the Omnissiah represents knowledge itself, the fundamental principles underlying reality. And you, Alex Mercer, are a living demonstration of principles we've only theorized. Valeria's voice came through the vox again. Mercer, Call is trustworthy, eccentric, but brilliant. If anyone can help you stabilize your condition, it's him. Help, Mercer said bitterly. Everyone wants to help me, to study me, to use me. What does the Mechanicus get out of this? Knowledge, Call replied simply. You will allow us to study your adaptive mechanisms. In exchange, we will provide you with resources to maintain stability, to prevent the chaos corruption from overwhelming your consciousness, and perhaps, eventually, to understand how you crossed between realities. That last part caught Mercer's attention. You know about that? We have detected unusual dimensional resonances in your cellular structure, echoes of trans-reality displacement. The Mechanicus has studied such phenomena for millennia. We may be able to help you understand how you arrived here, perhaps even how to return to your origin point, if that is your desire. The offer was tempting, too tempting, which made Mercer suspicious. What's the catch? No catch. Only terms of mutual benefit. Call's mechanical fingers manipulated hololithic displays that appeared in the air. You gain stability and knowledge. We gain understanding of unprecedented biological principles. And the Imperium gains a potential weapon against both chaos and the Tyranids. Before Mercer could respond, the sky tore open. A warp rift, massive and bleeding crimson light across the heavens. Through it poured beings of pure malevolence. Daemons, hundreds of them, Nurgle's children, coming to reclaim their wayward champion. Plague-bearers shambled forward, their rotting bodies spreading disease with every step. Beasts of Nurgle, slug-like creatures the size of tanks, oozed acidic slime. And behind them, something worse. A great unclean one. A greater daemon of Nurgle, its massive form barely fitting through the rift. Your grandfather calls you home, little virus. The daemon's voice was jovial and horrifying. You have spread such beautiful corruption. Now join us in the garden. Eternal. Simultaneously. Reality cracked in different places. Dimensional portals opened with mathematical precision. Through them came warriors of living metal. Necrons. Ancient machines that had slept for millions of years. They moved with eerie silence, their weapons humming with technologies that predated human civilization. At their head stood a Necron overlord, his metal form decorated with symbols of authority. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone filtered through dimension shifts. Anomalous bioconstruct detected. Unusual integration patterns observed. Subject designated for capture and analysis. Resistance will be met with immediate disassembly. Mercer found himself at the center of a three-way battle. Daemons wanting to corrupt him. Necrons wanting to study him. And somewhere above, Karamazov's fleet preparing to cleanse everything with orbital fire. Call's tech priests deployed defensive protocols immediately. Conversion beamers that reduced daemons to their constituent atoms. Graviton weapons that crushed Necron warriors into compressed metal cubes. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. We must evacuate, Call said calmly, despite the chaos. I have a transport prepared, but you must choose now, Mercer. Come with me to Mars and accept our assistance. Or stay here and face extinction from multiple fronts. Mercer looked at the daemons promising corrupt immortality, at the Necrons offering cold analytical dissection, at Call offering uncertain partnership, and at the sky, where Karamazov's ships were moving into bombardment position. None were good choices. All required sacrifice. But one option let him keep his autonomy. Let him maintain control over his own fate, even if that control was limited. Get me out of here, Mercer said. Call's tech priests moved with practiced efficiency. They surrounded Mercer with some kind of stasis field that locked his biology in temporal suspension. The corruption couldn't spread. The daemons couldn't touch him. The Necron's weapons passed through the field harmlessly. Transport initiating, Call announced. Reality bent around them as teleportation technology activated. The last thing Mercer saw before displacement was the great unclean one reaching for him with diseased talons and the Necron overlord's glowing eyes tracking his departure. Then, everything went white. Mercer woke on a ship, not an Imperial vessel, but something that felt different, more advanced. The walls were smooth and covered in flowing equations. Tech priests moved between stations, their augmented forms interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Call stood over him, scanning equipment in multiple mechanical appendages. Welcome back to consciousness. We have successfully extracted you from Secundus Prime. Karamazov executed Exterminatus Protocol approximately 3 minutes after our departure. The planet is now a lifeless rock. 7 million people dead because of the chaos he'd helped create. Mercer tried to sit up but found he couldn't move. The stasis field still held him, though partially. Where are we going? Not Mars, Call said. Too many eyes watch the red planet. We travel to a research facility in the Ghoul Stars, a region where the Imperium's reach is limited, where we can study you properly without interference from more orthodox elements of the Mechanicus. You're taking me somewhere isolated, Mercer realized. Somewhere no one will find me. Somewhere you will be safe. Call corrected. The Tyranid hive mind knows about you now. Chaos has marked you for possession. The Necrons see you as a specimen worth capturing, and the Inquisition considers you a threat requiring elimination. The only place you can exist without constant threat is outside the Imperium's normal operational space. It made horrible sense. Mercer had become too dangerous, too valuable, too unique for any faction to ignore. His only safety lay in isolation. And what do you want in return? Mercer asked. Really want? Call was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, there was something in his voice that might have been reverence. To understand how biology can achieve what technology cannot, you integrate the incompatible. You adapt to the impossible. You are living proof that there are principles we have not yet discovered. Studying you may unlock knowledge that advances the Omnissiah's vision by millennia. So I'm an experiment. You are a partner, Call said. We will study you. Yes, but we will also help you. The chaos corruption can be permanently contained with proper technology. Your adaptive abilities can be refined and controlled. And perhaps, given time, we can help you find purpose in this reality you've been thrust into. Mercer closed his eyes. He was tired, so incredibly tired. Fighting, surviving, trying to maintain his humanity while becoming something increasingly inhuman. What if I just want to disappear? He asked quietly. What if I'm tired of being anyone's weapon or specimen or threat? Then you make that choice, Call replied. But consider this. You have power that could save lives. The ability to fight enemies that threaten billions. Yes, you are changed. Yes, you carry corruption that would doom anyone else. But you maintain your will, your consciousness, your choice. That is more rare and precious than you understand. In the weeks that followed, Mercer came to accept his new reality. Call's facility was vast and isolated, built into an asteroid in a region of space where normal Imperial operations rarely ventured. The tech priests studied him, yes, but they also helped him develop control over his abilities. The chaos corruption remained, locked in biological prisons created by the Tyranid countermeasures. Occasionally, it tested those restraints, whispering promises of power, but Mercer learned to ignore it, to accept it as part of himself without letting it define him. He also learned that he couldn't return to his original reality. The dimensional displacement that brought him to Warhammer 40K was one way. Whatever force or accident had moved him between universes had closed behind him. This dark galaxy was his home now. Months passed, then years. Call occasionally asked him to assist with specific situations. A Tyranid splinter fleet that needed unconventional solutions. A chaos incursion where his unique resistance to corruption proved valuable. Mercer helped, carefully, always maintaining his autonomy. He never became what Valeria wanted, a pure weapon against the Imperium's enemies. He never became what Nurgle wanted, a daemon prince spreading corruption. He never became what the Tyranids wanted, integrated biomass serving the hive mind. He became something else, something undefined, a unique existence in a universe that demanded categorization. One day, Call showed him surveillance data from multiple worlds. Small anomalies, beneficial mutations, appearing in populations exposed to certain biological agents, diseases that cured rather than killed. impossible healings that defied explanation. Your cells, Call explained, fragments that broke away during your battles. They survive independently, carrying echoes of your consciousness, too small to reform into you, but large enough to affect local biology in unpredictable ways. Mercer studied the data. On a death world, children with radiation sickness suddenly recovering. On a hive world, a plague halted by an unknown biological factor. Small miracles in a universe that rarely allowed such things. He'd become distributed, not intentionally, but inevitably. Pieces of him scattered across the galaxy, too small to be Alex Mercer, but large enough to carry his final choice. To protect rather than destroy, to heal rather than corrupt. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined. Wasn't victory or redemption or return home. It was survival of a different kind. Persistence. Existence, despite everything trying to eliminate, or corrupt, or control him. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, Alex Mercer had found a third option. Not winning, not losing, but continuing, adapting, surviving on his own terms. And perhaps, in a universe as dark as this, that was enough. Years later, on a forgotten world at the galaxy's edge, a child found strange biomass, black and red, pulsing with faint life. When she touched it, her wounds healed. The fragment couldn't speak or think beyond simple impulses, but it remembered, dimly, wanting to protect. The child carried it home, and in the darkness, a small light persisted. Not bright enough to illuminate the galaxy, not powerful enough to change the Imperium's brutal calculus, but present, surviving, refusing to be extinguished, and sometimes that was the only victory possible.